So after a year in Spain, you went back home to the UK. Did you have any urge to work somewhere else, to work somewhere away from home, to see the world, so to speak?
Okay, this is probably actually the most boring answer that you're going to hear from me. Um, I did move back to the UK after my year in Spain, but it was merely really that I thought I had to kind of validate my qualification. Um, I did something called PGCE, as I mentioned before, which is a postgraduate certificate in education, and I I was under the impression that I needed to come back and get a teaching post in a further education college, adult education college, in order to make that qualification valid. Um, I'm not sure if it was the case. I never actually sort of found out whether I needed to do that to become fully qualified. But I have to say that I haven't wholly regretted it. The past 3 years now that I've been teaching here has been, part of the richest experience that I've had in my life. Whereas whether it's been teaching or just in general, so I wouldn't take it back at all. I wouldn't say that I feel really I regret not having travelled around all the countries of the world and gone to different places. Um, Sometimes I do think about it, but it's not something that I think, I chose the wrong option. No, not at all. I'm glad I came back, and I'm glad for the experience that it's allowed me to have.
Tell us a little about your students now.
As I mentioned before, I teach in a further education college. Um, yeah, we are one department in that college. There are also sort of mainstream courses that other students, not language learners, go on. And my students there at that college, they are mostly adults, mostly 19 plus, um, and they're from a variety of countries. I mean, you have people from places like Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. You've got people from African countries. You've got people from places in South America. Quite a few Brazilians this year, um, but also students from typical EFL students, possibly from places like Germany, from France, from Spain. Um, Whether they're here to just on holiday in the UK, just staying for a year or something, or working as au pairs, so they're here for perhaps a year, maybe two, um, or they might have moved here permanently for whatever reason, maybe for work, or because their family moved here, or the conditions in their country became such that they couldn't stay there. So there's a huge variety, and a huge variety of needs, interests, experience, um, as well as just the languages that they bring. Um, so it's such a diverse student body, and I find engaging with those learners so interesting, and that's one of the reasons why I said I'm certainly not regretful that I did come back and work here. It's been really great, and I think that's been down to the students. Yeah.
Mike, you're somewhat of a Dogma fan, aren't you? Tell me, do you teach on blog all the time? Do you prepare your classes? Do you analyze your classes?
Well, I've become more interested in teaching unplugged, really in the last 12 months or so. I actually think that a lot of what Scott Thornbury and Luke Meddings advocate in a dogma approach to language teaching unplugged, is what people do in ESOL teaching in the UK. It's very conversation driven. We have to be very resourceful with the materials that we're using, and there's not the money to shell out for course books for every learner. You're teaching learners language that they need, language that they need to function in society. So a lot of the time that does come from the learner. So I think that the Teaching Unplugged idea and ESOL teaching fit very well together. So I do like it. I do like taking that approach. I wouldn't say I'm a wholly unplugged teacher. I mean, I do use resources. I do use course book material from time to time. But equally, you know, there are lessons when I just go in and it's just me and the learners and the conversation that we're having. We have to prepare the classes. We have to make lesson plans for each lesson. That's part of our job in FE. How much detail these plans need to be in can vary. I mean, when I started teaching, I'd plan, you know, to the tiniest detail, you know, minute by minute. And since then I've got a bit more confident in having, you know, larger parts, not necessarily planned in that level of detail, and, you know, leaving space for whatever crops up in the lesson. Afterwards, you know, you think about what you've taught, and part of that is what I do with my blog. It's a space where I just post something that I've been thinking about after a lesson or before a lesson. So that's my space for analysing and evaluating activities, approaches, what's happened with my student, you know, why is X not learning Y piece of language, sort of thing. So I wouldn't say I teach unplugged all the time, but and I wouldn't say I, you know, completely go in with no plan, because, well, I mean, even if you teach unplugged, you don't go in with no plan.
What do you like most about teaching?
And it's quite hard to answer those questions. I mean, you've got some good questions here, Chu. You know, the part that I really love about teaching is the fact that every day, every moment, every class, every student can be different, and is different, really. So it's that variety of experiences that you have when you're teaching. You know, no year, no course, no class is ever the same. Even if you've got exactly the same students, even if you've got exactly the same kind of material, there's uncertainty there. And that's what makes teaching, and that's what makes life worth living. You know, it's interesting.
And what do you hate most?
On the flip side of that, what do I hate about teaching? It's a hard question to consider, really. I would have to say it's the conditions that sometimes you're forced or expected to work in. That might be to do with the space that you have, but it also might be to do with certain expectations that an employer or your institution or the educational system might have of its teachers, and that's something that's quite hard to deal with, to square your own teaching philosophy, your own way of being a teacher, with those things that we have to fit into, and those different, you know, boxes that we have to tick and so on. So really, that's the part I like the least. Yeah.
You've got a blog, right? But you stopped writing temporarily, I hope, a few months back. Now, why? And what had you hoped to achieve from the blog anyway?